He followed her there to mock her pathetic attempts to impress him, but went completely pale when three girls with his exact facial features and distinctive green eyes waved from their mother's luxury helicopter while she casually mentioned they inherited his rare genetic condition. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The Boston winter of 2009 was particularly brutal. Snow piled in dirty heaps along Commonwealth Avenue, and the wind sliced through even the heaviest coats like they were made of tissue paper. But nothing compared to the cold that permeated Jackson Reed's Beacon Hill apartment on that February evening, a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Tiffany Williams stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her reflection ghostly against the darkening cityscape. Her fingers trembled, not from the cold, but from what she held in her hand, a small plastic stick that had just changed everything. "Jackson," she said, her voice barely audible over the jazz playing softly from his expensive sound system. "I need to talk to you." Jackson Reed glanced up from his MacBook, annoyance flashing across his handsome features. At 26, the newly appointed vice president of development at Reed Enterprises looked every bit the Boston Brahmin, confident, privileged, untouchable. "Can it wait? I'm finalizing the Singapore proposal." He didn't bother looking up again, his fingers continuing their rhythmic tapping on the keyboard. Tiffany took a deep breath. She'd planned to tell him over dinner at the small Italian restaurant where they'd celebrated her scholarship award 8 months ago. She'd imagined candlelight, perhaps a moment of shock followed by cautious joy. Instead, he'd canceled their reservation to work, ordering in sushi that now sat untouched on the marble counter. "I'm pregnant, Jackson," she finally said, turning to face him. The plastic test extended like an offering. The tapping stopped. For 3 heartbeats, the only sound was the saxophone wailing softly from the speakers. Then Jackson closed his laptop with deliberate slowness. "What did you say?" His voice was perfectly controlled, as if she'd just mentioned a minor scheduling conflict. "I'm pregnant." She stepped closer, still holding out the test with its unmistakable 2 pink lines. "I found out this morning. I took 3 tests to be sure." Jackson rose from his ergonomic chair and walked past her to the bar cart, a gleaming Art Deco piece that had belonged to his grandfather. He poured himself 2 fingers of Macallan 18, the amber liquid catching the light as he swirled it. "And what exactly do you expect me to do with this information?" he asked, his back still to her. Tiffany blinked, confusion replacing her nervousness. I thought we would talk about it. About us, about options, about our future." A sharp laugh escaped him, causing her to flinch. "Future?" He turned, his green jade eyes, the eyes that had first drawn her to him in Harvard's Widener Library, now cold and appraising. "Tiffany, be serious. You're a scholarship student from Detroit. I'm a Reed. What future did you imagine we had?" The words hit her like physical blows. They had been seeing each other for 8 months, studying together late into the night, spending weekends tangled in his Egyptian cotton sheets. Yes, he kept their relationship private. Corporate politics, he'd explained, but the intimacy they'd shared felt real. "I thought we meant something to each other," she said quietly, one hand unconsciously moving to her still flat stomach. Jackson took a long sip of his scotch before setting the crystal tumbler down with a decisive click. "You were convenient, Tiffany. Intelligent. Attractive. Available. But temporary." His voice took on the same tone he used when rejecting subpar business proposals. "A black girl from Detroit with no family connections? You really thought you'd fit into my world? That I'd throw away my future on an unwanted child?" The deliberate cruelty in his words made Tiffany step back, steadying herself against the wall. "This isn't just about you, Jackson. This is our child." "No." He moved to his mahogany desk and pulled open the top drawer. "This is your problem." He extracted a thick envelope and turned, his movements precise and controlled. $10,000, enough to solve the problem and then some. He tossed the envelope at her feet, where it landed with a soft thud on the plush carpet. Be sensible, Tiffany. You're too smart to ruin your life over sentimentality. Your economic scholarship, your career plans, you'd throw all that away? I can't do that, she whispered, tears silently tracking down her cheeks. This child is part of me, part of us. There is no us, there never was. His voice was cold, detached. He pressed a button on his phone. Security, I need you in apartment 1801. Now. As they waited in tense silence, Jackson picked up the pregnancy test she'd set on the coffee table. With deliberate, ostentatious disdain, he tore it into pieces and dropped them into the wastebasket. You're just a temporary mistake, Tiffany. You were never going to be enough for someone like me. My family has expectations. I need someone from my circle, someone who understands the world I live in. 2 burly security guards appeared within minutes. With a dismissive nod, Jackson instructed, "Please escort Ms. Williams out. She is no longer authorized in this building." "Jackson, please," Tiffany begged, the envelope still untouched on the floor. "Just talk to me. We're adults. We can figure this out." "There's nothing to figure out. You were a pastime, Tiffany. Now it's over." The security guards stepped forward, one on each side of her. As they guided her to the door, she continued to protest, her tears staining the expensive carpet. One of the men, older with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable but remained professional as they led her to the elevator. In the lobby, the same guard handed her the envelope he'd retrieved from the floor. Tiffany stared at it for a moment before walking to the decorative fountain in the center of the marble foyer. With deliberate precision, she dropped the envelope into the water, watching as it slowly darkened and sank. Outside, the February wind bit through her thin coat. She hadn't dressed for an extended period outdoors, expecting to spend the evening in Jackson's warm apartment discussing their future. Now she had no future to discuss, at least not with him. The following morning, Tiffany sat on her narrow dorm room bed, staring at her laptop screen. The email from Harvard's administration glowed accusingly. Her scholarship was being reviewed due to academic performance below expectations in the previous semester, exactly when she'd started seeing Jackson. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. She recognized the power of the Reed name at Harvard. One word from Jackson or his father, and doors closed, or scholarships disappeared. With her meager savings, she couldn't possibly cover Harvard's tuition. Without the scholarship, her academic career was effectively over. The next weeks passed in a blur of desperate calculations and impossible choices. Tiffany withdrew from Harvard when it became clear she couldn't afford the tuition. She found a tiny apartment in Dorchester, sharing with 2 other women who asked few questions. She secured 3 jobs: receptionist at a medical clinic during the day, waitress at a diner in the evenings, and data entry clerk on weekends. Each night, she fell into bed exhausted, her hands smelling of disinfectant from the clinic or grease from the diner. But before sleep claimed her, she would place her hands on her growing belly and whisper promises to the life within. Promises of love, of security, of a future built through sheer determination. 12 weeks into her pregnancy, Tiffany sat nervously in the community health center, waiting for her first ultrasound. The technician, a middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, squeezed cold gel onto her stomach and began moving the wand. "Let's see what we have here," she murmured, her eyes fixed on the screen. Then she paused, adjusting the wand slightly. "Oh, is something wrong?" Tiffany asked, panic rising in her throat. "Not wrong at all," the technician replied, her smile widening. "But there's not just one baby in there. I'm seeing 1, 2, 3 separate heartbeats. You're having triplets, dear." "3 babies?" Tiffany whispered, tears of shock, not sorrow, filling her eyes. "I'm having 3 daughters? Well, it's too early to tell the sex, but yes, 3 babies. Look." She turned the screen, pointing out 3 tiny, pulsing points of light. 3 strong heartbeats. That night, In her small, sparsely furnished room, Tiffany sat by the window, staring at the ultrasound printout. 3 babies. 3 times the responsibility, 3 times the cost, 3 times the challenge. For the first time since leaving Jackson's apartment, she felt real fear. How could she possibly support 3 children on her own? Her advanced pregnancy soon forced her to quit 2 of her jobs. The savings she'd managed to accumulate quickly dwindled with prenatal vitamins and doctor visits. When she couldn't make rent, she spent nights in temporary shelters, her belongings reduced to what would fit in a backpack. It was in one of these shelters, 7 months into her pregnancy, that Tiffany met Eleanor Chen. Eleanor, a former tech executive who volunteered at the shelter on weekends, noticed the heavily pregnant young woman poring over programming textbooks between shifts at her remaining job. "Why are you studying coding when you can barely feed yourself?" Eleanor asked, sitting down beside Tiffany. Tiffany looked up, her eyes clear and determined despite the dark circles beneath them. "Because technology is the future, and my daughters deserve a future," she replied without hesitation. "Every line of code I learn is one step closer to getting out of here." Eleanor studied the young woman, her obvious intelligence, her fierce determination despite her circumstances. "You were in college before?" "Harvard, economics, full scholarship." Tiffany closed her book. Life had other plans. Impressed by what she saw, Eleanor made an unexpected offer: a room in her suburban home and, more importantly, an internship at her small technology consultancy. The night before her scheduled C-section, in the simple but comfortable room Eleanor had provided, Tiffany wrote a letter to her unborn daughters. "My loves, the world will try to convince you that you are not enough. A man once tried to convince me of that. Today I make you a promise. I will build an empire with my own hands so that you will never, ever depend on someone who does not value you. One day, the one who rejected us will see what he lost, not for revenge, but because our worth always existed, even when he couldn't see it." On April 15, 2010, Jade, Maya, and Summer Williams were born, all healthy, all with striking green jade eyes. When the nurse asked about the father, Tiffany simply replied, "They have me. That's all they need." That night, as she watched her 3 tiny daughters sleeping in the hospital nursery, Tiffany couldn't know that 16 years later, Jackson Reed would stand paralyzed as he saw those same green eyes, inherited from him, shining in the faces of 3 young billionaires the whole world admired. Tiffany woke with a start, momentarily disoriented by the softness beneath her. For a fleeting second she feared she'd dreamed it all: Eleanor's kindness, the safe room, the escape from the shelter's hard cots. But as morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains, reality settled in. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, feeling the familiar flutter of movement within. This small guest room in Eleanor Chen's suburban Boston home was a universe away from the women's shelter where she'd spent the previous week. A real bed, clean sheets, a door that locked, privacy, a luxury she hadn't known since leaving Harvard. "Good morning," Eleanor said, appearing in the doorway with a steaming mug. "Ginger tea. Helps with morning sickness, though you're probably past that stage." Tiffany accepted the mug gratefully. "Thank you, for everything." Eleanor waved away her thanks. "I've made breakfast. Nothing fancy, just oatmeal with fruit. The doctor's appointment is at 10. We should leave by 9:30. The doctor's office was in a sleek medical building downtown, worlds apart from the community clinic Tiffany had been using. Dr. Abrams, a maternal-fetal medicine specialist with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, studied the ultrasound monitor with practiced concentration. "The triplets are developing well," she said, "but I'm concerned about your blood pressure. Multiple pregnancies carry significant risks. You'll need absolute bed rest during the final trimester." Tiffany's heart sank. "I can't afford to stop working." Dr. Abrams frowned. "Ms. Williams, this isn't negotiable. Without proper rest, you risk premature labor, possibly endangering all 3 babies. Eleanor, who had accompanied Tiffany, spoke up. "Work arrangements won't be a problem, doctor. Tiffany will have everything she needs." Later, driving back to Eleanor's house, Tiffany stared out the window. "I can't accept more charity. I've already imposed enough." Eleanor kept her eyes on the road. "It's not charity, it's investment. I've seen your work ethic, your intelligence. The coding exercises you completed last night showed remarkable aptitude." She paused at a red light. "My consultancy needs talent. You need income and flexibility. I'm offering you an internship. You can work remotely during bed rest, learn our systems, contribute where you can." Tiffany turned to study the older woman. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" 15 years ago, I was pregnant and alone in a new country. Someone took a chance on me." Eleanor met her gaze. "Sometimes the universe requires us to pass on kindness." Over the following weeks, Tiffany threw herself into learning everything she could about programming and security systems. Eleanor's small tech consultancy specialized in back-end security for financial institutions, complex work that challenged Tiffany's already sharp mind. She worked from a makeshift desk Eleanor had set up in the guest room, her growing belly barely fitting under the table. While her body grew increasingly unwieldy, her mind remained razor-sharp. She devoured textbooks on coding languages, encryption protocols, and system architecture. Often, Eleanor would find her asleep on open books, pen still in hand, complex diagrams scattered around her. "You need to rest," Eleanor admonished one evening, covering Tiffany with a blanket. "I am resting," Tiffany mumbled, not opening her eyes. "My brain is just working overtime." As her due date approached, Dr. Abrams scheduled a C-section. 3 babies is a crowd, she explained during Tiffany's final checkup. A planned cesarean is safest. The night before surgery, anxiety kept Tiffany awake. Not fear of the procedure, but of what came after. 3 newborns, no family support, a career barely beginning. How would she manage? She had just dozed off when sharp pain jolted her awake. Her hand flew to her abdomen, feeling it harden beneath her fingers. When warm wetness spread beneath her, she knew the babies had their own schedule. "Eleanor," she called, voice tight with panic. "I think it's time." The hospital was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. 34 weeks, a nurse announced. "Preterm labor. Blood pressure spiking," another called. "Prep for emergency C-section," Dr. Abrams ordered, her calm voice anchoring Tiffany amid the chaos. As they wheeled her toward surgery, terror gripped Tiffany. Not for herself, but for her daughters. Too early, too small, too fragile. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular, "let them be okay." The operating room was frigid. Numbness spread from her spine downward as the anesthesiologist worked. Dr. Abrams's face appeared above the surgical drape. "We're starting, Tiffany. Stay with us." Pressure, tugging, voices calling out medical terms she couldn't process. Then, miraculously, a cry, tiny but fierce. "Baby A," someone announced. "Time of birth, 3:17 a.m. More pressure, another cry. "Baby B, 3:19 a.m. The third came silently. Tiffany's heart stopped until a suctioning sound was followed by an indignant wail. "Baby C, 3:21 a.m. 3 girls, all breathing on their own." Tears streamed down Tiffany's face as they briefly showed her each daughter before rushing them to the NICU. All 3 impossibly small, all with a shock of dark hair, all with eyes, when briefly opened, of startling jade green. Jackson's eyes. Recovery was brutal. The C-section incision throbbed, her body depleted from carrying 3 babies. Yet Tiffany insisted on being wheeled to the NICU as soon as she could sit upright. The triplets lay in separate incubators, connected to monitors with blinking lights and beeping alerts. Each weighed just under 4 pounds, small but mighty, as the NICU nurse described them. "Have you chosen names?" the nurse asked, updating charts. Tiffany nodded, touching each incubator gently. "Jade," she said, for the firstborn who had opened her eyes the widest. "Maya," for the second. who had gripped the doctor's finger with surprising strength, and Summer, for the third, who had fought the hardest to breathe. The nurse hesitated before asking the standard question. "And the father's name for the birth certificates?" Tiffany looked at her daughters, each with Jackson's distinctive eyes, and made her decision. "There is no father. They have me. That's all they need." After 2 weeks in the NICU, the triplets were deemed strong enough to go home. Eleanor had transformed her dining room into a nursery, with 3 bassinets arranged in a semicircle. "It's temporary," she assured Tiffany, "just until you find your feet." Those first months were a fog of exhaustion. The triplets rarely synchronized their schedules, meaning someone was always hungry, wet, or crying. Tiffany functioned on 15-minute naps and pure determination. Eleanor proved an unexpected blessing, working from home 3 days a week to help. "Consider it on-the-job training," she joked when Tiffany protested. "You're learning multitasking skills no business school could teach." Between feedings and diaper changes, Tiffany continued her work for Eleanor's consultancy. She created a makeshift office, laptop on the coffee table, one baby in her lap, another in a swing, the third on a playmat. She mastered one-handed typing and learned to code while humming lullabies. "You're extraordinary," Eleanor remarked one evening, finding Tiffany debugging software with Maya asleep on her chest and Jade in a carrier on her back. "Most people would have broken by now." Tiffany looked up, dark circles under her eyes but determination intact. Breaking isn't an option when you're responsible for 3 lives. When the triplets were 8 months old, their personalities already distinct. Jade observant and serious, Maya active and curious, Summer thoughtful and determined. Tiffany faced her first major crisis as a mother. All 3 girls developed high fevers simultaneously, likely from a virus Maya had contracted at her pediatrician's office. For 72 hours, Tiffany barely slept, monitoring temperatures, administering medication, keeping them hydrated. It was during those endless hours of worry that her mind, operating on some separate track of consciousness, solved a security problem she'd been wrestling with for weeks. As the girls' fevers finally broke and they slept peacefully, Tiffany frantically typed out the algorithm that had crystallized in her exhausted mind, a new approach to identifying patterns in seemingly random data, perfect for detecting financial fraud before it happened. When she presented it to Eleanor the next day, eyes bloodshot but voice steady, her mentor stared at the code in disbelief. "This isn't just good, Tiffany. This could change everything." Eleanor looked up. "We need to patent this immediately." "Patent it?" Tiffany frowned, bouncing Summer gently. "Is it really that valuable?" "It could revolutionize fraud detection. Financial institutions would pay millions for this." Eleanor's expression grew serious. "This is your ticket, Tiffany. Your way out." 3 months later, Tiffany sat in a lawyer's office, the triplets corralled in a portable playpen the receptionist had hastily assembled. She signed the patent application, her handwriting neat despite Jade pulling on her sleeve. "What happens now?" she asked the patent attorney. "Now we wait for approval, then start fielding offers." He smiled. "Based on preliminary interest, I'd say you should prepare for significant changes in your financial situation." On the day the triplets turned 2, Tiffany received the call that would alter their trajectory forever. A major credit card company wanted exclusive rights to her fraud detection system. Their offer, $1.2 million. She sank to the floor of Eleanor's kitchen, phone clutched in trembling hands. Maya immediately crawled into her lap, concerned by her mother's unusual stillness. "Is everything okay, Mommy?" the toddler asked, her vocabulary advanced for her age. Tiffany gathered all 3 girls into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Everything is perfect, my loves. Mommy can give you a real home now." That evening, after the girls were asleep in the room they'd called home for over 2 years, Tiffany and Eleanor shared a bottle of champagne on the back porch. "I can never repay you," Tiffany said softly. "You don't need to. Just promise me one thing." Eleanor refilled their glasses. Use this money to build something lasting. Not just a comfortable life, but a legacy for your daughters. I already have the name, Tiffany confided. Phoenix Innovations. Because we rose from the ashes of what could have destroyed us. She didn't know that across town, Jackson Reed was celebrating his engagement to Vanessa Astor at Maison Robert, Boston's most exclusive restaurant. As he ordered a $500 bottle of champagne, he raised a toast to perfect matches and flawless futures. The diamond on Vanessa's finger caught the light as she smiled, the appropriate smile of a senator's daughter marrying into Boston aristocracy. The perfect match on paper, sealed with a perfect kiss for the society photographer hovering nearby. That night in Eleanor's guest room, Tiffany gazed at her sleeping daughters, each with Jackson's unmistakable eyes, but with spirits entirely their own. She whispered the promise that would guide the next decade. He thought I wasn't enough. I'll build an empire that makes him irrelevant. While Jackson opened a $500 bottle of champagne to celebrate his engagement with Vanessa Astor, he couldn't possibly imagine that the insufficient girl from Detroit was planting the seeds of an empire that would one day make Reed Enterprises seem insignificant in comparison. 5 springs had come and gone since that night in Eleanor's kitchen when Tiffany had received the life-changing phone call. Now, on a sunny April afternoon, she stood in the modest Brooklyn apartment that her first patent had made possible, surrounded by balloons and streamers in 3 different colors: green for Jade, blue for Maya, purple for Summer. "Happy birthday, my brilliant girls," Tiffany called, carrying a homemade cake adorned with 5 candles. The triplets gathered around the small dining table, their identical jade-green eyes widening at the sight of the cake decorated with mathematical symbols, a nod to their growing fascination with numbers. "Make a wish," Tiffany encouraged as the girls leaned forward in perfect synchronicity, their dark curls, so like her own, falling around their faces. After the cake had been devoured and the last present unwrapped, Tiffany watched her daughters play with their new educational tablets. At 5, they were already showing signs of exceptional intelligence. Their preschool teachers had called multiple conferences to discuss their advanced abilities. Just last week, Ms. Paulson had pulled Tiffany aside after class. "Jade completed this puzzle in under 30 seconds, she'd explained, showing Tiffany a complex pattern game designed for children twice her age. "I've never seen anything like it." Now, watching Jade methodically arrange digital blocks on her tablet, solving puzzles meant for 10-year-olds, Tiffany felt a mixture of pride and concern. Her daughters were special, not just in her eyes but objectively, measurably so. Maya, always the most physically active of the 3, had abandoned her tablet to build an elaborate tower of blocks. "Look, Mommy, it's stable because the weight is distributed properly," she explained, using vocabulary no typical 5-year-old would possess. Summer, the quietest triplet, sat cross-legged on the floor, reading to her sister's stuffed animals. Though she hadn't been formally taught to read, she had somehow taught herself, memorizing entire books after seeing them just once. "How did we get so lucky?" Eleanor asked, helping Tiffany clean up the birthday debris. Eleanor had remained a constant in their lives, transitioning from mentor to family friend and unofficial godmother to the triplets. "I ask myself that every day," Tiffany replied, watching her daughters with wonder. "Sometimes I think it's the universe's way of balancing the scales." The following Monday, Tiffany sat in a sleek conference room in Midtown Manhattan, facing 3 men in expensive suits. Her own attire, a carefully chosen blazer from a consignment store paired with her one good pair of slacks, felt suddenly inadequate. "Ms. Williams, your security protocol shows promise," said the middle executive, not bothering to hide his skepticism. "But Phoenix Innovations seems underdeveloped. You're asking for $2 million in seed funding with just 1 significant patent and a team of what? 3 programmers?" "5 programmers now," Tiffany corrected calmly, "all with advanced degrees. And yes, the patent portfolio is still growing, but our implementation has already saved Credit Union Financial over $12 million in potential fraud. The ROI speaks for itself. The oldest investor leaned forward. Forgive my bluntness, but how do you manage this business as a single mother to 3 young children? Our investment requires certainty of leadership focus. Tiffany had anticipated this question. It arose in every meeting, rarely asked of male founders with families. I manage the same way all executives with families do, with excellent time management and a strong support system. The difference is, I don't have the luxury of failure. My daughter's future depends on Phoenix's success, which means I work twice as hard with twice the determination. The meeting ended without commitment. As she gathered her presentation materials, Tiffany overheard a whispered comment. Single black mother from Detroit. Not exactly our typical investment profile. Outside, she allowed herself exactly 60 seconds of disappointment before straightening her shoulders and heading to the subway. She had another meeting in Brooklyn, and the future didn't build itself. The Phoenix Innovations office occupied a converted storefront in a rapidly gentrifying Brooklyn neighborhood. What it lacked in prestige, it made up for in energy. Tiffany had used her initial earnings to transform the space into a functional tech hub. Simple desks arranged in collaborative pods, walls covered in whiteboards filled with code, a small kitchen stocked with coffee and energy bars. "How did it go?" asked Raj, her lead developer, looking up from his screen as she entered. "About as expected. They loved the technology but questioned whether I'm the right person to lead it." Tiffany set down her bag and immediately turned to the central whiteboard. Their loss. The National Bank meeting tomorrow will be different. Her small team, 5 developers and an office manager, had been carefully selected not just for talent, but for belief in her vision. Most had left more prestigious positions, drawn by the chance to build something innovative from the ground up. By 6 o'clock, Tiffany had revised her presentation, debugged a security protocol, and rushed to pick up the girls from their after-school program. The evening routine was a carefully choreographed ballet. Dinner preparation while overseeing homework, bath time while responding to emails, story time while mentally rehearsing tomorrow's pitch. As she tucked the girls into their beds, all 3 insisting on sharing one room despite the apartment having 3 small bedrooms, Maya asked the question Tiffany had been anticipating for months. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like Zoe and Emma?" Her innocent eyes, so like Jackson's in color but so different in warmth, searched Tiffany's face. Tiffany sat on the edge of the bed, gathering her thoughts. She had prepared for this moment, consulting child psychologists about the best approach. The truth, they all agreed, was essential, but shaped appropriately for their age. "Come sit with me, all of you," she said, patting the carpet. The girls scrambled down, forming a small circle on the colorful rug. "Everyone's family is different," Tiffany began, choosing her words carefully. "Some have a mommy and daddy, some have 2 mommies or 2 daddies, some have grandparents who take care of them. Our family is you 3 and me." "But where is our daddy?" Jade pressed, always the most direct. Tiffany took a deep breath. "Your father is someone I knew before you were born. When I told him I was going to have babies, he decided he didn't want to be a father. He chose not to be part of our family." "Didn't he want us?" Summer asked quietly, her lower lip trembling slightly. Tiffany pulled her close. "His choice had nothing to do with you and everything to do with him. Some people aren't ready for the responsibility of children." "Is he bad?" Maya asked, her expression serious. "No, not bad," Tiffany corrected gently. "Just someone who made different choices than I did. And you know what? He did us a favor." 3 identical faces looked at her in confusion. "He freed us to become extraordinary on our own terms," Tiffany explained. "We built our own special family, and instead of being sad about who isn't here, we can celebrate who is." That night, after the girls were asleep, Tiffany sat at her small desk reviewing code. Her phone buzzed with a news alert, a profile of Boston's rising business leaders. Out of curiosity, she opened it, scrolling until she found what she unconsciously sought. There was Jackson, photographed in his father's company headquarters, looking every inch the corporate scion. The caption identified him as newly promoted Chief Strategy Officer at Reed Enterprises. His recent marriage to Vanessa Astor, daughter of Senator William Astor, merited a mention. Tiffany studied his face, still handsome, perhaps more polished than she remembered. She felt nothing but a distant recognition, like identifying an actor from a half-forgotten film. The power he once held over her emotions had evaporated, replaced by a clear-eyed assessment of a man who had shown his true character when it mattered most. She closed the article and returned to her work. Jackson Reed belonged to her past. The future demanded her attention. That future arrived sooner than expected. 3 months after the triplets' 5th birthday, Tiffany secured a meeting with the Department of Defense to present Phoenix's new encryption protocol. The military contract would mean stability, growth, legitimacy, everything Phoenix needed to move to the next level. The night before the presentation, Tiffany worked late in the office, fine-tuning her demonstration. The girls slept on the small couch she'd installed for exactly these situations, 3 small forms bundled under a shared blanket. Around 2 in the morning, Raj appeared with coffee. "You should rest," he advised, eyeing the exhaustion evident on her face. "I'll rest when we have this contract," Tiffany replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "This is too important to leave anything to chance." The following day, dressed in her first non-consignment suit, a modest investment in appearance she'd finally allowed herself, Tiffany stood before a panel of government officials. For 90 minutes, she explained Phoenix's proprietary approach to cybersecurity, fielding technical questions with confidence born of absolute mastery of her subject. When the lead official extended his hand and said, "Welcome to the government contractor family, Ms. Williams," the professional mask she'd worn all day nearly cracked with emotion. The celebration at Phoenix's office was jubilant but humble. Plastic cups of champagne for the adults, sparkling cider for the triplets, who insisted on being part of every company milestone, and a grocery store cake with Phoenix Rises written in red icing. $15 million, Raj announced, reading the contract terms aloud to cheers from the small team. Multi-year commitment with option for renewal. "And this is just the beginning," Tiffany added, raising her plastic cup. "To everyone who believed in us when we were just an idea and a rented storefront." Later that night, carrying 3 sleeping 5-year-olds from the car to their apartment, a feat of maternal strength she'd perfected over the years, Tiffany whispered to her exhausted but brilliant team, "We're just getting started, my stars." Across the city, in a gleaming Manhattan high-rise, Jackson Reed frowned at the quarterly reports from Reed Enterprises' technology division. Innovation had stagnated. The company his grandfather had built and his father had expanded was losing market share to nimbler competitors with fresher ideas. "These projections are unacceptable," he snapped at his father, who still maintained his position as CEO despite increasingly erratic decision-making. "We're hemorrhaging talent to startups while investing in outdated technology." Richard Reed waved dismissively. "These tech fads come and go. Reed Enterprises has weathered every market shift for 3 generations by sticking to fundamentals." "The fundamentals have changed, Dad," Jackson argued, frustration evident. "We need to adapt or we'll be obsolete within 5 years." The elder Reed's face hardened. "I built this company into what it is today. Your job is to maintain it, not reinvent it." In their opulent Upper East Side apartment later that evening, Jackson poured himself a scotch, the same Macallan 18 he'd been drinking the night Tiffany had shown him the pregnancy test. The memory occasionally surfaced, an uncomfortable ripple in the smooth narrative of his perfect life. Vanessa entered, elegant in evening wear. "The car is waiting. The symphony gala starts in an hour." Jackson nodded, draining his glass. Another night, another required appearance. Their marriage functioned like a well-oiled machine, efficient, presentable, and utterly devoid of passion. As he slipped on his tuxedo jacket, he caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. Success, wealth, position, he had everything he'd ever been raised to value. Yet the man looking back at him seemed hollow, as if something essential had been carved away. While Jackson smiled for society photographers that evening, his mind was elsewhere, troubled by his father's resistance to change and the growing sense that the life he'd chosen might not be the victory he'd once imagined. While he signed the contract that would transform Phoenix into a multi-million-dollar company, Tiffany couldn't predict that in just 10 years, it would be Jackson Reed desperately seeking investors to save the company his father was slowly destroying. 10 years after the birth of the Triplets, Manhattan's skyline gleamed with possibility as Tiffany cut the ceremonial ribbon stretched across the entrance of Phoenix Innovation's new Brooklyn headquarters. 50 employees applauded, many wiping away tears as she spoke about their journey from a converted storefront to this renovated 4-story building that now served as the nerve center for their growing operations. From 5 developers in a rented space to 50 brilliant minds under our own roof, Tiffany announced, her voice steady with pride. Phoenix didn't just rise, we soared. The new headquarters represented more than business success. It was physical proof of a promise kept. Walls of glass allowed natural light to flood open-concept workspaces. A dedicated lab for prototype testing occupied the entire 3rd floor. Most importantly, a state-of-the-art childcare center filled the ground level, Tiffany's non-negotiable requirement when designing the space. That afternoon, as staff explored their new surroundings, Tiffany slipped away to attend the State Mathematics Olympiad where 10-year-old Jade was competing against high schoolers. She arrived just as her daughter approached the whiteboard for the final round. Jade stood before the judges, her posture confident despite being half the height of her teenage competitors. The problem on the board involved advanced calculus concepts that most adults would struggle to comprehend. With methodical precision, Jade worked through the equation, her handwriting neat and precise as she explained each step with vocabulary that belied her age. The solution requires recognizing this as a modified Bernoulli differential equation, Jade explained to the stunned judges, completely unfazed by the audience's murmurs. Once reframed, the integration becomes straightforward. When she was announced as the winner, the youngest in the competition's history, Jade's smile was small but satisfied. She didn't jump or cheer. Instead, she nodded once, as if simply confirming what she already knew to be true. "That's my brilliant girl," Tiffany whispered, capturing the moment on her phone to share with Maya and Summer later. Back at their apartment, still modest by Manhattan standards but comfortable and filled with books, Maya waited excitedly by the door, tablet in hand. "Mom, look what I made this weekend," she announced, thrusting the device at Tiffany before she could even set down her keys. "It's an app that helps kids learn fractions through cooking recipes. I coded it myself." Tiffany examined the colorful, intuitive interface with genuine amazement. The application was fully functional, with animations that demonstrated how measuring ingredients related to mathematical concepts. "Maya, this is incredible," Tiffany said, scrolling through the different levels. "You built this entire thing in one weekend?" Maya shrugged, though her eyes shone with pride. The coding wasn't hard. The animations took the longest. Summer emerged from the study they all shared, carrying a thick textbook on chemical engineering. At 10, she already had special permission to attend weekend laboratories at Columbia University, where a professor had taken interest in her unusual aptitude for scientific concepts. "Professor Kim says my experiment results are consistent enough to warrant further investigation," Summer reported calmly, as if discussing a playground game rather than university-level research. "He wants me to present my findings to his graduate students next month." That evening, after celebrating both Jade's victory and Maya's creation with takeout from their favorite Thai restaurant, Tiffany sat at her desk reviewing the final details for tomorrow's presentation to international investors. The Revolution AI system represented Phoenix's most ambitious project to date, an artificial intelligence security protocol that could predict and neutralize cyber threats before they materialized. Her phone buzzed with a notification. Eleanor was calling via video. "The girls told me about Jade's win and Maya's app," Eleanor said, her face slightly pixelated on the screen. You've raised three geniuses. Three completely different geniuses, Tiffany corrected with a smile. Sometimes I wonder how they came from the same embryo split three ways. Speaking of which, Eleanor's tone grew more serious. Have you thought more about the tech pioneer interview request? It would be tremendous exposure for Phoenix. Tiffany sighed, glancing at the email she'd left unanswered for 3 days. The prestigious technology magazine wanted to feature her and the Triplets in a cover story about women in tech and extraordinary young talents. I'm concerned about the publicity for the girls, she admitted. They're already dealing with being different. Plus, their paternity has remained private so far. A national magazine cover might change that. They're 10 now, Eleanor reminded her gently. Old enough to have some say in the decision? Why not ask them? The following morning, in her conference room overlooking the Brooklyn Bridge, Tiffany presented Revolution AI to a group of Japanese and German investors. As projections of the system's capabilities filled the screens around them, she could see skepticism transform into genuine interest. Traditional security systems are reactive, she explained, demonstrating how the AI anticipated attack patterns. Revolution AI is predictive. It doesn't just build walls, it identifies threats before they reach your perimeter. The lead investor, a typically stoic Japanese businessman, leaned forward. You've created something remarkable, Ms. Williams. We would like to discuss exclusive licensing for Asian markets. By that afternoon, Tiffany had secured $8 million in new investment with favorable terms that maintained Phoenix's independence. As the investors departed, her operations director handed her a folded newspaper. You might want to see this, he said quietly. The financial section featured a photograph of Jackson Reed looking uncharacteristically disheveled as he exited the federal courthouse in Boston. The headline read, Reed Enterprises patriarch indicted for securities fraud, son to take helm. Tiffany scanned the article dispassionately. Richard Reed, Jackson's father, had apparently been manipulating company financials for years, inflating values and hiding losses. Now facing federal charges, he was stepping down, leaving Jackson to manage the family's crumbling legacy. She set the paper aside, feeling neither satisfaction nor pity. Jackson Reed had become as irrelevant to her daily thoughts as last year's weather. That evening, Tiffany gathered the Triplets in their living room for a family meeting. She explained the magazine's interest in featuring them, carefully outlining both the opportunities and potential concerns. This would mean more people knowing about you, about us, she explained. It might lead to questions about your father. Jade, analytical as always, asked, What's the statistical likelihood of him seeing the article and recognizing us? Impossible to calculate precisely, Tiffany answered honestly. But if this runs in Tech Pioneer, industry leaders will see it, including him. Why should we care about someone who never cared about us? Jade asked, her tone matter-of-fact rather than bitter. Maya, always more emotional, looked troubled. Would he try to contact us if he saw it? I don't know, Tiffany admitted. But if he did, I would protect you. You wouldn't have to see him unless you wanted to. Summer, who had been quietly listening, finally spoke. You always tell us not to make decisions from fear. If this article helps other girls see what's possible in science and technology, isn't that more important than worrying about him? Tiffany studied her daughters' faces, so similar in appearance, so distinct in personality, and felt a surge of pride at their maturity. You're right, Summer. We won't hide who we are or what we've accomplished because of someone who chose not to be part of our story. 2 months later, Tiffany stood in Phoenix's lobby beside her daughters, all four dressed in coordinated outfits for the Tech Pioneer photo shoot. The magazine had decided on a dramatic cover showing Tiffany standing behind the seated triplets, all against the backdrop of Phoenix's sleek research lab. Now give me serious future of technology faces, the photographer instructed, capturing shot after shot of the four remarkable Williams women. The accompanying article would highlight Phoenix's meteoric rise under Tiffany's leadership, and the extraordinary achievements of the triplets, mentioning only briefly that they had grown up without their father, with no names or identifying details included. On the day Tech Pioneer hit newsstands, Jackson Reed entered his therapist's waiting room for his weekly appointment, a requirement imposed by the board after his uncharacteristic public outburst during a shareholders' meeting. Stress from managing the company's crisis had taken a visible toll. New lines etched his face, and silver threaded his once uniformly dark hair. Absently, he picked up a magazine from the coffee table, barely registering the title until something caught his eye. 4 faces stared back at him from the glossy cover: a striking black woman in her 30s and 3 identical young girls with familiar green jade eyes. He froze, his breath catching. Those eyes. The distinctive Reed heterochromia, the small golden fleck in the left iris that had marked his family for generations, the angular jawline that mirrored his own, the height unusual for their age. The woman. Could it be? 15 years had transformed the struggling student he remembered into a poised executive, but something in her confident smile triggered a distant memory. Jackson quickly flipped to the feature article, scanning for names. Tiffany Williams, Phoenix Innovations, Triplets, Jade, Maya, Summer, 10 years old. His mind raced with calculations. 15 years ago, a pregnancy test, a cruel dismissal. The coincidence seemed impossible, yet the evidence stared back at him in high-resolution color. Those were Reed eyes looking out from the magazine cover, eyes identical to his own. For a moment, curiosity and disquiet rippled through him. Could these brilliant children actually be related to him? The timing aligned perfectly. The physical resemblance was undeniable. But then his therapist's door opened and Jackson quickly closed the magazine, dismissing the thought as an unlikely coincidence. His life was complicated enough managing his father's legal troubles and the company's precarious position. He couldn't afford distractions based on superficial similarities to 3 random children. "Mr. Reed, I'm ready for you now," his therapist called. Jackson set the magazine down, the moment of recognition fading as quickly as it had appeared. By the time he settled into the leather chair in Dr. Klein's office, he had already filed away the strange feeling, focusing instead on the more immediate crisis of saving Reed Enterprises from his father's mistakes. The magazine with Tiffany and the triplets on the cover was left in the waiting room, the resemblance of the girls to Jackson Reed visible to anyone who knew the family. Little did he know that in just 5 years, that resemblance would be exposed to the entire world, destroying the carefully constructed facade of his perfect life. The magazine with the triplets remained in Dr. Klein's waiting room, forgotten by Jackson but noticed by others. Over the following weeks, several Reed Enterprises board members saw the issue at their own doctor's offices or on flights, yet none made the connection between the girls' distinctive eyes and those of their CEO. The resemblance was hiding in plain sight, visible only to those who knew what to look for. 2 years passed. The triplets turned 12, growing taller and more remarkable with each passing month. They no longer looked like children, but rather like young women with old souls, their minds racing far ahead of their peers. On a crisp autumn morning, Tiffany observed from the back of a university lecture hall as Summer confidently explained her findings on quantum algorithm efficiencies to a room full of graduate students and their professor. The Nobel laureate physicist who had taken an interest in Summer's work nodded approvingly as the 12-year-old fielded complex questions with remarkable poise. "The quantum entanglement solution I've proposed reduces computational time by 67% compared to current methodologies," Summer explained, manipulating 3D projections of data with casual expertise. "The implications for large-scale problem-solving are significant." Later that week, in a different prestigious setting, Tiffany stood in her Tokyo hotel room, preparing for the ribbon-cutting ceremony at Phoenix's first international office. Her phone buzzed with a video call from Eleanor. "The Tokyo Times is calling Phoenix the rising star of cybersecurity," Eleanor reported. "Your keynote speech is sold out." Tiffany smiled, adjusting her crimson blazer. the signature color that had become synonymous with Phoenix innovations. "How are the girls?" Jade just finished proving some mathematical theorem that's apparently stumped people for decades. Maya's teaching the coding boot camp for underprivileged kids she designed, and Summer's refining her paper for that science journal. 12 going on 30, Tiffany said with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. Back in New York, the triplets had been granted unprecedented access to university resources. After their academic abilities had repeatedly broken testing scales, several Ivy League institutions had created special programs just to accommodate them. They weren't merely gifted children, they represented a level of genius that appeared perhaps once in a generation, or in this case, 3 times in one birth. When Tiffany returned from Tokyo, she found Maya bursting with excitement, eager to show her the app she'd developed. "It's called Math Magic," Maya explained, demonstrating the sleek interface. "I noticed the kids in my coding class struggling with basic algebra, so I built this to make it intuitive. The school district already wants to license it." Tiffany marveled at the elegant solution. At 12, Maya had identified a problem and created a marketable product to solve it, all while maintaining straight A's in her accelerated courses. "We should patent this," Tiffany said, scrolling through the app's features. "Already started the paperwork," Maya replied with a grin. That same evening, as they prepared dinner together, a family ritual Tiffany insisted on maintaining despite their increasingly complex schedules, Summer cleared her throat with uncharacteristic hesitation. "Mom, Professor Daniels wants to publish my paper on quantum algorithms in the Journal of Computational Physics." Tiffany set down the knife she was using to chop vegetables. "That's incredible, Summer." "There's just one thing," Summer continued. "The journal requires authors to have institutional affiliations. Professor Daniels suggested I could list myself as a research associate at Columbia, but they'd need parental consent since you're 12, Tiffany finished. Actually, he suggested something else: legal emancipation. The kitchen fell silent. Jade and Maya stopped their tasks, watching the exchange intently. "All 3 of us have been discussing it," Jade added, stepping forward. "Princeton's mathematics department wants me to join their advanced research program. Maya's app has commercial potential, and Summer's research could lead to significant patents. Emancipation would allow us to enter into legal agreements," Maya explained. "Sign contracts, claim patents, publish under our own names." Tiffany leaned against the counter, processing what her daughters were proposing. "You want to become legally independent? At 12? "Not independent from you, Mom," Summer clarified quickly. "Just legally recognized as capable of making certain decisions. We'd still live here, still be your daughters in every way that matters." The following week, Tiffany met with Phoenix's legal team to discuss the implications. The lawyer specializing in family law laid out the process clearly. Given their documented exceptional abilities, academic records, and the support of multiple university departments, I believe the court would grant emancipation, she explained. "It's unusual at their age, but not unprecedented for extraordinary cases." "This wouldn't affect my custody or parental role?" Tiffany clarified. "No, it simply gives them legal standing to enter certain agreements that minors typically cannot. They'd remain your dependents, living with you, but with additional legal rights regarding their intellectual property and academic pursuits." That evening, Tiffany called a family meeting in their living room. "This decision is yours," she told the triplets, who sat side by side on the sofa. "Emancipation is a legal step, but it doesn't change our family. I'll support whatever you choose." "We've thought this through carefully," Jade responded, always the most analytical. "The benefits outweigh any potential complications." Tiffany studied their faces, so young yet so determined. "Then we'll move forward. But promise me one thing. Being legally emancipated doesn't mean you need to grow up faster than you already have. You're still allowed to be 12 sometimes." While the Williams family navigated their extraordinary circumstances with thoughtful planning, Across town, Jackson Reed faced a very different scenario. The spacious conference room at Reed Technologies headquarters vibrated with tension as the board meeting entered its third hour. "These quarterly results are unacceptable," declared Harrison Wells, the oldest board member and a friend of Jackson's grandfather. "Your father may have made serious mistakes, but at least he drove innovation. What's your plan to reverse this decline?" Jackson loosened his tie slightly, feeling the pressure like a physical weight. "We're exploring strategic acquisitions to bolster our technology portfolio. The market has shifted faster than anticipated." "Excuses," interrupted another board member. "While we're losing market share, companies like Phoenix Innovations are revolutionizing the industry with half our resources." "Phoenix is an anomaly," Jackson countered, though the name sparked that strange sense of recognition he occasionally felt since seeing the magazine years earlier. "We need to focus on our core competencies while strategically diversifying." Later that night, in their Upper East Side penthouse, Jackson poured himself a double scotch while Vanessa prepared for another charity gala. "The Astor's Foundation dinner is at 8, she reminded him, fastening diamond earrings that had once belonged to his grandmother. "Try to look less defeated when we arrive." "I can't make it tonight," Jackson replied, not meeting her eyes. "The board wants revised projections by morning." Vanessa's expression hardened. "That's the third event you've missed this month. People are starting to talk. Let them talk. The company is what matters right now." "And what about our family planning discussion? We agreed to revisit it after your father's legal issues settled." Jackson drained his glass. "My career is in crisis, Vanessa. This isn't the time to think about children." "It's never the time, is it?" she replied coldly, gathering her clutch. "Don't wait up." After she left, Jackson returned to his home office surrounded by spreadsheets projecting Reed Technologies' continuing decline. The legacy his grandfather had built and his father had expanded was slipping through his fingers despite his best efforts. Meanwhile, Tiffany was supervising the move to a spacious Upper East Side apartment, a calculated upgrade that placed the family closer to the universities where the girls spent much of their time. Though still modest by Manhattan elite standards, the 5-bedroom apartment represented another milestone in their journey. "Your rooms are down this hallway," Tiffany told the triplets as the movers brought in the last of their belongings. "You each have your own study space now." "Mom, you got the place with the rooftop garden," Summer exclaimed, delighted by the terrace visible through the living room windows. "Perfect for your botany experiments," Tiffany confirmed. "And Maya, your room connects to the small workshop space you wanted." As the girls explored their new home, Tiffany's phone rang with a call from MIT's Department of Computer Science. "Ms. Williams, we're hoping to arrange a campus visit for Maya. Our faculty is quite impressed with her algorithmic approaches and would like to discuss potential research opportunities." "Maya is 12, Tiffany reminded them, though she knew age had become increasingly irrelevant in discussions of her daughter's abilities. "We're aware. That's precisely why we're interested. Students with her potential are exceedingly rare." Similar calls came from Princeton regarding Jade and Stanford inquiring about Summer. The academic world had discovered the Williams triplets, and elite institutions were competing for their attention. 2 months later, in a small Manhattan courtroom, Tiffany watched with mixed emotions as each of her daughters signed the emancipation documents. They looked impossibly young in their formal attire. 3 identical girls in tailored navy suits that matched Tiffany's own. "By the power vested in me by the state of New York," the judge proclaimed, "I hereby grant the petition for legal emancipation for Jade, Maya, and Summer Williams, with all rights and responsibilities therein." The occasion felt momentous, yet understated, much like the girls themselves. There was no celebration afterward, just a quiet dinner at home where they discussed Summer's upcoming presentation at a quantum computing conference. The following day, the Wall Street Journal ran a small feature, "Williams Triplets, Legal Emancipation at 12 for Academic Prodigies." The article detailed their extraordinary accomplishments and the unique legal arrangement that would allow them to pursue advanced academic and professional opportunities while still under their mother's care. The story caught the attention of academic and business circles, but remained relatively contained until the New York Times Sunday magazine featured a more in-depth profile titled, "The Future is Female: How Three 12-Year-Old Sisters Are Revolutionizing Science and Technology." That profile included a striking family portrait, Tiffany seated with her daughters standing behind her, all four with identical expressions of dignified confidence. The caption noted they were redefining what a family of female innovators can accomplish when barriers are removed. At Reed Technologies, Jackson spent evenings reviewing potential acquisition targets that might inject much-needed innovation into the company's aging portfolio. He scribbled notes on company after company, marking those with promising technology but manageable acquisition costs. His assistant had compiled detailed dossiers on 20 potential targets, including financial projections, technology assessments, and background on key personnel. Near the bottom of the stack, a familiar name caught his eye: Phoenix Innovations. Jackson flipped through the report quickly, noting the impressive growth trajectory and innovative security protocols. Something about the company nagged at his memory, but after 14 hours of similar reviews, all the reports had begun to blur together. He added Phoenix to the potential pile before moving to the next candidate. "The board is right," he muttered to himself, rubbing his tired eyes. "We need to acquire innovation because we can't seem to generate it ourselves anymore." The decision from the Reed board came the following week. "We need to acquire transformative technology within 5 years or face potential insolvency." The mandate was clear: evolve or die. While Jackson Reed furiously scribbled names of technology companies for potential acquisition, he had no idea that the solution to Reed Technologies' problems was literally in his DNA, in the 3 brilliant minds that shared his genes but that he had rejected before they were even born. While Jackson Reed frantically scribbled names of technology companies for potential acquisition, the Williams women were rewriting the rules of academic achievement. Just 4 years after their legal emancipation, the triplets reached another milestone that left university administrators scrambling to accommodate their unprecedented brilliance. "Princeton University is pleased to offer Jade Williams admission to our advanced mathematics program," read the letter that arrived on a crisp March morning. Similar envelopes from MIT and Stanford followed, addressed to Maya and Summer respectively. "They've accepted all 3 of you," Tiffany announced, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling in her chest. "Full scholarships." The triplets, now 14, received the news with characteristic poise. Where other teenagers might have screamed or jumped, they simply exchanged small smiles of satisfaction, as if the most prestigious universities in America routinely admitted 14-year-olds. "Princeton's mathematics department has the highest concentration of Fields Medal winners," Jade noted pragmatically, already considering the advantages of her chosen institution. "MIT's Artificial Intelligence Lab just received that billion-dollar grant," Maya added, her eyes bright with possibilities. "And Stanford's quantum research facility is unparalleled," Summer concluded. Tiffany studied their faces, so young yet so assured, their features maturing into a striking blend of her determination and Jackson's aristocratic bone structure. At 14, they stood nearly as tall as she did, each with the same distinctive green jade eyes that occasionally caused Tiffany's heart to clench when caught in certain light. "We need to discuss logistics," Tiffany said, ever practical. "These universities are in different states. I won't have my daughters scattered across the country at 14, scholarships or not." "We've already considered that," Jade replied. "Each university has agreed to hybrid arrangements. 2 weeks on campus per month with remote learning and research the remainder of the time." "You've negotiated with Ivy League institutions without telling me?" Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "Not negotiated," Maya clarified. "Explored options. We wouldn't make decisions without you." That evening, as Tiffany worked late in her home office reviewing quarterly projections, She felt a familiar mixture of pride and wistfulness. Her daughters were accelerating toward adulthood at a pace that sometimes left her breathless. Just yesterday, it seemed, they were toddlers stumbling through their first steps. Now they were discussing quantum physics over breakfast. Her phone vibrated with a notification from Phoenix's security team. Phoenix Security Protocol Alpha initiated. Someone was attempting to breach their main server. Within seconds, her screen filled with real-time defense metrics as their system repelled the sophisticated attack. Tiffany's fingers flew across the keyboard, tracking the intrusion attempt. Phoenix's revolutionary security system, the one they'd spent 3 years perfecting, was performing exactly as designed, adapting to the attack patterns and strengthening vulnerabilities in real time. When the threat was neutralized, she received the automated confirmation: breach attempt contained. Origin: Eastern Europe. Systems secure. This was the third major attack attempt this month, each more sophisticated than the last. Phoenix's reputation as the gold standard in cybersecurity had made them both highly sought after and targeted. Their client list now included central banks, defense departments, and multinational corporations, entities for whom security breaches could mean catastrophic consequences. The following morning, Tiffany stood before Phoenix's executive team in their Manhattan headquarters, the wall of windows behind her framing the city skyline. Last night's attack was a level 5 attempt, the most sophisticated we've seen, she explained, projecting the attack analytics. Our system not only repelled it but adapted its defenses in real time. This is precisely what we promised our banking clients. Sarah Chen, Phoenix's chief operating officer and Eleanor's niece, scrolled through the data on her tablet. The timing is interesting, 3 days before our presentation to the International Banking Consortium. Corporate espionage, suggested the security director. Someone wants to know if we can deliver what we're promising. We just did, Tiffany replied with quiet confidence, which makes Thursday's presentation all the more powerful. The Phoenix innovations that Tiffany now commanded bore little resemblance to the struggling startup of a decade earlier. With over 2,000 employees across 7 countries, Phoenix had transformed from a boutique security firm into a global technology leader. Their proprietary AI security protocols protected 30% of the world's digital banking transactions and had prevented an estimated $12 billion in potential fraud in the previous year alone. The corporate expansion had necessitated personal evolution as well. The Tiffany Williams who now led board meetings and negotiated 9-figure contracts had refined her natural poise into an unshakable executive presence. Her wardrobe of consignment finds had given way to custom suits in Phoenix's signature crimson. Her once practical hairstyle now came courtesy of Manhattan's most exclusive salon. Yet for all the external transformation, Tiffany remained fundamentally unchanged in her priorities. Her daughters first, her company second, everything else a distant third. That Thursday, as Tiffany prepared for the International Banking Consortium presentation in her Upper East Side apartment, the triplets discussed their latest projects over breakfast. "I've completed the predictive algorithm revision," Jade announced, pushing her tablet across the table to show her sisters. "The error rate is down to 0.03%. "Perfect timing," Maya replied, adjusting her thin-framed glasses. "I've refined the interface. It now works seamlessly with Summer's prototype." Summer nodded, satisfaction evident in her slight smile. "The miniaturized quantum processor is ready for final testing. If it performs as projected, we'll revolutionize the energy sector." Tiffany listened to this exchange with quiet pride as she reviewed emails on her own tablet. Their brilliance had long since ceased to surprise her, but their collaboration still filled her with wonder. Despite their different specialties, the triplets worked together with an intuitive synchronicity that produced innovations greater than the sum of their parts. "Don't forget about the economic forum tonight," Tiffany reminded them, scanning a message from her assistant. "You'll be seated in the front row. It's important for Phoenix that the world sees its next generation of leadership." "Mom's going to crush it as always," Summer said with a grin. How many acquisition offers will you turn down this time? Tiffany smiled, setting down her coffee cup. No company is for sale. I didn't build this empire to hand it over to the same men who doubted me. What Tiffany didn't know was that among the attendees at the New York Economic Forum would be Jackson Reed, now CEO of Reed Technologies following his father's forced retirement due to the financial scandal. Reed Technologies, once an industry giant, had been struggling since losing innovation ground to more agile competitors, primarily a mysterious Phoenix Innovations, whose founder rarely appeared in media. That afternoon, while preparing for the event at the Plaza Hotel, Tiffany received a call from Sarah. The acquisition of Reed Quantum has been approved by their board, Sarah informed her, barely containing her excitement. We got it for a third of market value. They're desperate. Excellent, Tiffany replied, unaware that she had just acquired the most promising division of the company owned by the man who had abandoned her. Send the documents for signature tomorrow. Today we have a speech to deliver. In her closet, Tiffany hesitated between two outfits. Finally, she chose the vibrant red, the color of Phoenix, the color of power, the color of a woman who would never be invisible again. Across town, in his penthouse apartment, Jackson Reed adjusted his Hermes tie while practicing his talking points for the Economic Forum. Reed Technologies had been invited to participate in a panel discussion on corporate restructuring, a diplomatic way of addressing the company's very public struggles following his father's disgrace. Reed Technologies remains committed to innovation through strategic partnerships, he rehearsed to his reflection, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. The truth was far less polished. Reed Technologies was bleeding talent, losing market share, and running out of options. The quantum computing division had been their last truly innovative department, and the board had forced him to sell it to an anonymous buyer for fast cash. The humiliation of that concession still burned. His phone chimed with a message from his assistant. Car waiting downstairs. Economic Forum begins in 1 hour. Jackson grabbed his suit jacket, giving his reflection one final assessment. At 41, he still maintained the polished appearance expected of a Reed, though stress had etched new lines around his eyes and mouth. His recent divorce from Vanessa had been mercifully quick but painfully public, adding personal humiliation to his professional challenges. At the Plaza Hotel, event staff made final preparations for the Economic Forum, adjusting the lighting in the grand ballroom and testing the sound system. On the program, printed on heavy cardstock with gold lettering, the name Tiffany Williams, CEO, Phoenix Innovations, headlined the evening as the keynote speaker. When Jackson arrived, he nodded to various business acquaintances as he made his way to the bar, barely glancing at the event program tucked into his pocket. He ordered a scotch, neat, his mind occupied with the panel discussion where he would have to defend Reed Technologies' strategic repositioning to a room full of people who recognized it as the desperate move it was. "Reed, good to see you," called a former business school classmate, now heading a successful venture capital firm. "Tough break about the quantum division? Any idea who acquired it?" Jackson forced a smile. "Just a holding company. We're focusing on core competencies now." "Smart," his acquaintance replied without conviction. "Say, are you staying for the keynote? This Tiffany Williams is supposed to be extraordinary. Built Phoenix from nothing while raising triplets as a single mother. Now they're worth what, $4 billion? Jackson's attention sharpened. Triplets. Yeah, teenage daughters who are apparently as brilliant as their mother. Child prodigies or something. Never been much media about them until recently. A strange uneasiness settled in Jackson's stomach. He pulled out the program, finding the keynote speaker's brief biography. Tiffany Williams, founder and CEO of Phoenix Innovations, previously at Harvard University, current board member of 3 Fortune 500 companies, mother to Jade, Maya, and Summer. The names meant nothing to him, but something about the constellation of details triggered a distant memory. Harvard, single mother, triplets who would now be teenagers. Before he could pursue the thought, the lights dimmed, signaling the start of the forum. Jackson made his way to his assigned seat, the uneasiness growing with each step. The forum chairman welcomed attendees and introduced the first panel. Jackson participated in his discussion on autopilot, delivering rehearsed answers while his mind churned with half-formed connections. When the panels concluded, there was a short intermission before the keynote address. Jackson found himself scanning the crowd, though he wasn't sure what or whom he was looking for. Near the stage, he noticed three identical teenage girls in formal attire, their height and poise making them stand out despite their youth. Something about their profile, the way they held themselves, struck him as oddly familiar. As attendees returned to their seats, Jackson studied the program photograph more carefully. The headshot of Tiffany Williams was professional but revealed little, a poised black woman with an assured smile, yet something about her eyes nagged at his memory. The chairman returned to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pleasure that I introduce our keynote speaker for this evening. She started from nothing 15 years ago and built a technology empire valued at over $4 billion. The visionary behind Phoenix Innovations, Tiffany Williams. Enthusiastic applause filled the room as Tiffany walked confidently to the podium. Jackson looked up, distracted, and then froze, the blood draining from his face. It was impossible not to recognize her, even 15 years later. The same penetrating eyes, now framed by a face that radiated power and confidence. Time had transformed her from a young college student into an extraordinarily powerful woman. "Thank you," Tiffany began, her voice resonating clearly through the microphone. Phoenix was born from the conviction that the greatest innovations emerge when we face the greatest challenges. 15 years ago, I was a single mother struggling to survive. Today, we command the ethical artificial intelligence revolution. In the front row, Jackson noticed the three remarkably similar teenagers, all in impeccable formal attire, all with dark hair perfectly arranged, all with his eyes. The characteristic jade green of the Reeds, with the partial heterochromia that had marked his lineage for generations. The air seemed to vanish from his lungs. His hands gripped the chair arms so tightly his knuckles turned white. 15 years, 3 girls, the unmistakable eyes of his family. "I built my empire from nothing while raising my daughters in Brooklyn, without a penny of inheritance or family privilege, just determination and the silent promise that one day we would stand at the top," Tiffany continued, her gaze sweeping the audience until it briefly rested on Jackson, a flash of cold recognition crossing her face before she moved on. "Tonight, I have the pleasure of introducing the future of Phoenix Innovations, my daughters, Jade, Maya, and Summer Williams." The 3 teenagers rose, nodding politely to the applauding audience. Tiffany continued, pride evident in her voice. "Jade has been accepted to Princeton at 15 for her work in theoretical mathematics. Maya entered MIT after developing a security system that now protects 30% of global banking transactions. And Summer will attend Stanford to continue her pioneering work in quantum computing." The audience erupted in applause while Jackson remained paralyzed, the world crumbling around him. Daughters. He had daughters, prodigies, geniuses, and he had rejected them before they were even born. While Tiffany prepared for the event in the Plaza Hotel, she didn't know that in less than 24 hours, 15 years of secrets would be exposed in a confrontation that would paralyze Manhattan's financial elite and forever change the legacy of 2 families. The realization crashed upon Jackson like a physical blow. He couldn't tear his eyes away from the 3 young women standing beside their mother. His daughters. The thought formed with terrifying clarity as he studied their features from across the ballroom. The Reed jawline, the distinctive eyes, even the way they held themselves with that particular posture his mother had always insisted upon. How had he not seen this coming? The magazine cover from years ago flashed in his memory, the connection he'd dismissed now impossible to ignore. For the next 45 minutes, Jackson barely registered the content of Tiffany's presentation, absorbing only fragments while observing, hypnotized, the women who could have been his family. When Tiffany announced Phoenix's new AI platform that would render half of existing market technologies obsolete, including Reed Technologies' primary product, he barely reacted, still processing the personal earthquake reshaping his reality. Our quantum-enhanced security protocol represents a paradigm shift, Tiffany explained, her voice steady with authority as she highlighted projections on the massive screen behind her. Legacy systems simply cannot compete with the processing power and adaptive learning capabilities we've developed. Jackson watched numbly as investors around him leaned forward, captivated. His own company's security system, the Reed Secure platform that comprised 60% of their remaining revenue, had just been declared obsolete by the woman he'd once dismissed as not good enough for his world. When Tiffany concluded her presentation, the standing ovation was immediate and thunderous. Jackson rose mechanically with the crowd, his applause hollow as his mind raced with implications. 15 years ago, he'd thrown away not just a relationship, but the chance to be father to 3 extraordinary human beings, children who now stood poised to revolutionize the very industry his family had once dominated. The lights came up for the reception that followed. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres as the crowd broke into animated discussion groups. Jackson moved through the room like a ghost, accepting a glass of champagne that he drank too quickly, then another. His eyes never left Tiffany for long, watching as she navigated the reception with graceful efficiency, constantly surrounded by admirers and potential investors. The triplets moved through the crowd with surprising sophistication for 14-year-olds, engaging CEOs and scientists in complex conversations. Jackson observed from a distance, noting how Maya gestured expressively when explaining technical concepts, how Jade maintained direct eye contact during discussions, how Summer listened with analytical intensity before offering precise responses. They displayed none of the awkwardness typical of teenagers, only a confident poise that mirrored their mothers. "Reed, what did you think of the keynote?" asked Bernard Goldman, a venture capitalist who sat on Reed Technologies' board. "That Phoenix AI platform is going to disrupt the entire security sector. Your Reed Secure will need a complete overhaul to compete." "We're exploring options," Jackson replied automatically, his attention still fixed on Tiffany across the room. Goldman followed his gaze. "Impressive woman. Built that company while raising 3 kids alone. Makes you wonder what kind of idiot walked away from that family." The comment landed like a slap. Jackson excused himself abruptly, needing another drink. He circulated the perimeter of the ballroom, watching Tiffany and waiting for an opening. She remained constantly engaged, moving from one conversation to another with practiced ease, the crimson of her tailored suit making her a beacon in the crowded space. After an hour of strategic drinking and anxious circling, Jackson spotted Tiffany momentarily alone near the terrace doors, checking something on her phone. Heart pounding, palms damp with sweat, he approached. "Tiffany," he said, his voice unsteady, "it's been a long time." She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his without surprise. The composed expression never faltered as recognition registered. "Jackson Reed, I figured you might be here." "You knew?" The question emerged more vulnerable than he intended. "I know everything about you, Jackson. It's necessary for business." Her tone was neutral, as if speaking to an irrelevant stranger. "I heard Reed Technologies is facing difficulties. A shame." "Tiffany, those girls," he began, spilling champagne on his $10,000 Armani suit as his hands began to tremble. "My daughters," she corrected immediately, her voice sharp as a blade. "Jade, Maya, and Summer Williams. They're—" he couldn't complete the sentence. "Extraordinary? Brilliant? Everything you said I wasn't?" A thin smile formed on her lips. "Yes, they're all those things. They're my daughters," he finally verbalized, his voice almost a whisper. Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "Biologically, yes. In every other aspect that matters, no. You made that very clear 15 years ago. I didn't know. I never imagined, he stammered, that they would be triplets, that they would be geniuses, or that I would build an empire. She took a sip of champagne, perfectly controlled. Funny how life works, Jackson. You told me I would never be enough, but now your stock is worth half what it was yesterday, and your corporate debt is owned by my holding company. What? Jackson paled further. The subsidiary you sold yesterday in desperation to an anonymous investor? That was Phoenix. Tiffany smiled. Don't worry, we'll keep some of your employees. Photographers from the Wall Street Journal approached, requesting a photo of the titans of technology. Before Jackson could protest, Tiffany nodded in agreement, positioning herself professionally beside him while flashes fired. Mom? A young voice interrupted the moment. The triplets approached, their expressions curious as they observed Jackson. Girls, Tiffany maintained perfect composure. This is Jackson Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies. The three studied Jackson with eyes identical to his own, their faces strikingly similar to his except for the confident smiles they'd inherited from their mother. The famous Jackson Reed? Asked Maya, adjusting her glasses. Interesting to finally meet you. Finally? Jackson barely managed to articulate. Mom told us about you, Jade explained calmly. Part of our education was understanding the complete history of our origins. Mom said we should thank you, added Summer with penetrating intelligence in her gaze. If you hadn't rejected us, perhaps we wouldn't have learned that overcoming is the best fuel for success. Jackson felt the world spin. They knew. They had always known. Miss Williams, a reporter from the Financial Times approached. Could you comment on rumors that Phoenix acquired Reed's quantum division? I officially confirm, Tiffany responded with a smile. Phoenix Innovations has just added Reed Quantum to our portfolio for $400 million, a third of its real value but appropriate given their current financial situation. Smartphones around them began to light up with notifications as the news spread instantly. Jackson watched, helpless, as his company was dismembered in real time before the industry's leaders. If you'll excuse us, said Tiffany, checking her elegant watch. Our helicopter is waiting. We have a video conference with investors in Tokyo before dawn. As Jackson stood paralyzed, Tiffany and her daughters moved toward the hotel's helipad, dozens of executives and reporters following them like a royal court. On the terrace, alone with his half-empty champagne flute, he pulled out his phone to see the headline appearing on devices all around. Technology phenomenon reveals. Prodigy daughters are rejected. Heirs of Reed Empire. The twist that shook Wall Street. The next morning proved brutal for Jackson Reed. Turning on the television in his Tribeca penthouse, his face stared back at him from every financial channel, alongside photos of the triplets and sensational headlines. Reed CEO denied paternity of billionaire geniuses. Tiffany Williams, from rejected single mother to billionaire who bought ex's company. The heirs Jackson Reed never wanted to know. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reed Technologies' board had called an emergency meeting. His fiancée, Catherine Huntington, daughter of a senator and his strategically chosen partner to consolidate corporate alliances, had sent a terse message. We need to discuss what's in the news, immediately. Jackson sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands, memories from 15 years ago flooding back with merciless clarity. The pregnancy test, his cruel dismissal, the envelope of cash he'd tossed at her feet. Every heartless word he'd spoken that night now returned as a prophecy fulfilled in the worst possible way. His assistant called 3 times before he finally answered. Sir, the board is assembling at 10. They're demanding an explanation about your connection to Phoenix Innovations. The press is camped outside headquarters. What should I tell them? Tell them I'll be there, Jackson replied mechanically. After hanging up, he opened his laptop to find his email flooded with messages from board members, shareholders, and reporters. One subject line from a business blog caught his eye. The Williams triplets, everything Jackson Reed threw away. He clicked on it, confronting 3 school portraits of the girls at age 12, their achievements listed in bullet points that read like a mockery of his life choices. Jade Williams, mathematical prodigy accepted to Princeton at 14, solved the Henderson theorem that stumped mathematicians for decades. Maya Williams, programming genius whose security algorithms protect 30% of global banking, MIT's youngest admitted student in 50 years. Summer Williams, published quantum physicist at 13, Stanford-bound researcher whose work could revolutionize computing. Each accomplishment felt like another indictment of his decision 15 years ago. The article concluded with a quote from an anonymous Phoenix employee. Ms. Williams built her empire while raising 3 extraordinary daughters alone. She never speaks negatively about their father, only saying he chose a different path. The measured graciousness of that statement stung worse than any condemnation could have. As he dressed for the board meeting, selecting his most authoritative suit as if armor could protect him from the day ahead, Jackson caught his reflection in the mirror. His face looked gaunt, eyes haunted. The confident CEO mask he'd worn for years had cracked beyond repair. Meanwhile, at Phoenix Innovations headquarters, Tiffany conducted a morning meeting with characteristic calm, as if the previous evening had been just another business function. She reviewed quarterly projections, approved a new research initiative, and finalized the integration plan for Reed Quantum. Only when the team dispersed did Eleanor Chen, now senior vice president and her longtime mentor, close the door and ask, "How are you really feeling?" Tiffany sighed, allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. Strangely, lighter. 15 years keeping that connection as a secret, and now it's all exposed. I didn't plan the confrontation, but when I saw him there, did you know he would be at the event? I suspected. Reed is desperate for new investors after last quarter's fiasco. Tiffany smiled slightly. But I didn't imagine it would be so satisfying. And the girls? Eleanor asked carefully. They're processing. They've known about him their whole lives in abstract terms, but seeing him in person was different. Tiffany looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline, a view she'd once only dreamed of. They were magnificent, Eleanor. Poised, articulate, direct, everything I've raised them to be. They're your daughters, Eleanor replied simply. They couldn't be anything less. Tiffany's phone chimed with an alert. The Financial Times had published their exclusive on Phoenix's acquisition of Reed Quantum. The headline read, "Phoenix rises as Reed falls. The corporate takeover with a personal twist." When Tiffany pronounced the words, "I have the pleasure of introducing the future of Phoenix Innovations, my daughters, Jade, Maya, and Summer Williams," the world around Jackson Reed disappeared, replaced by the devastating realization that the 3 teenagers rising to the applause were not just the heirs to the empire he coveted, but the genetic legacy he had so cruelly rejected. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel had transformed into a battlefield, though the weapons were words and the casualties measured in reputation and market value. As Tiffany continued her keynote address, her voice carried with practiced precision through the hall, commanding attention from everyone, except Jackson Reed, who remained frozen in his seat, barely processing the content of her presentation. His mind had short-circuited, stuck in an endless loop of recognition and denial. Tiffany's slides changed seamlessly behind her, displaying Phoenix's revolutionary technologies with elegant simplicity. Our new Phoenix Quantum AI platform represents the convergence of quantum computing and machine learning, she explained, gesturing toward the complex diagrams that somehow made perfect sense under her narration. This integration allows for security protocols that can predict attacks before traditional systems would even detect a threat. In the front row, the triplets watched their mother with identical expressions of pride. They'd seen earlier versions of this presentation, had contributed to the underlying technologies, yet still regarded Tiffany with undisguised admiration. The practical application, Tiffany continued, means that systems like Reed Secure, which rely on reactive protection methods, will become as obsolete as firewalls from the early 2000s. The pointed reference wasn't lost on the audience. Several heads turned subtly toward Jackson, whose company's primary security product had just been publicly relegated to the technological graveyard. Reed Technologies shareholders exchanged worried glances, mental calculations of stock devaluation already running through their minds. Jackson barely registered the direct hit to his company. His attention remained transfixed on the three young women in the front row, each with his eyes, his jawline, his family's distinctive heterochromia, the golden fleck in the left iris that had marked Reed's for generations. Phoenix will begin implementing quantum AI for our banking clients next quarter, Tiffany announced. We project a 60% reduction in successful breach attempts across all sectors, with financial institutions seeing the most immediate benefits. For 45 excruciating minutes, Jackson endured what felt like a dual assault: the public dismantling of his company's technological relevance and the private revelation of paternity he'd denied. When Tiffany finally concluded her presentation, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Jackson stood mechanically, his applause hollow as he watched investors and competitors flock toward the stage, eager to align themselves with the future Tiffany Williams had just outlined. The reception that followed was equally torturous. Jackson circulated the edges of the ballroom, accepting congratulations for a panel discussion he barely remembered participating in, all while keeping Tiffany in his peripheral vision. She moved through the crowd with effortless grace, constantly surrounded by admirers and potential investors. The triplets likewise commanded attention, engaging seasoned executives in conversations that belied their 14 years. Maya explained complex coding principles to the CTO of a major bank. Jade discussed mathematical theory with a Nobel laureate. Summer debated quantum computing applications with the head of MIT's research division. Jackson drank champagne too quickly, accepting new glasses from passing servers without counting. Liquid courage, he told himself, though it did nothing to steady his nerves. After an hour of strategic positioning, he finally found his opportunity when Tiffany stepped momentarily away from her admirers, checking her phone near a relatively quiet corner. "Tiffany," he approached, his voice almost a whisper. "We need to talk." She looked up, her expression revealing nothing. "I believe we're talking now, Jackson." "Privately," he insisted. "Please. There's nothing private to discuss." Her voice remained professionally neutral. Any business between Phoenix and Reed Technologies can go through proper channels. "This isn't about business." He glanced around nervously. "It's about them." "My daughters?" Tiffany raised an eyebrow. "They're not a topic for discussion, especially not with you." Before Jackson could respond, a photographer from Forbes approached. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Reed, could we get a photo of Tech's power players?" Tiffany nodded graciously while Jackson struggled to compose himself. They stood side by side, not touching, as camera flashes captured what would become the business world's most analyzed photo of the year. "Perfect," the photographer said. "The contrast is fascinating, Phoenix rising while Reed recalibrates." The diplomatic phrasing for Reed's downfall wasn't lost on Jackson. As the photographer thanked them and moved away, he turned desperately back to Tiffany. "15 years ago, I made a terrible mistake. If I had known..." "Known what, exactly?" Tiffany interrupted, her voice still quiet but sharp as a scalpel. "That they would be brilliant? That I would succeed? Would that have changed your calculation of my worth?" The question hit with devastating accuracy. Would he have made a different choice if he'd somehow foreseen this outcome? The honest answer shamed him into silence. "Mom?" Maya's voice broke the tension as the triplets approached. "Dr. Hirano wants to discuss implementing quantum AI at the Tokyo Exchange." Tiffany turned to her daughters, her expression softening instantly. "Of course, let me introduce you properly." Jackson stood awkwardly as the three teenagers regarded him with identical analytical gazes. "Girls," Tiffany said, her composure perfect, "this is Jackson Reed, CEO of Reed Technologies." Jade, the most direct of the three, extended her hand formally. "We know who you are. Your company pioneered integrated security protocols in the early 2000s, innovative for its time." The polite acknowledgement of past relevance cut deeper than outright dismissal would have. Jackson shook her hand, overwhelmed by the strange sensation of touching his daughter for the first time. "The famous Jackson Reed," Maya observed, adjusting her glasses. "Interesting to finally meet you." "Finally?" The word escaped him as a question. "Mom told us about you years ago," Summer explained. "We've always known our complete origin story." "You knew about me?" Jackson looked between the three faces, so like his own, yet animated by expressions and intelligence that were entirely foreign. "Of course," Jade replied matter-of-factly. "Mom believes in complete honesty. She explained that you chose your career and social position over parenthood, a valid life choice, if short-sighted in retrospect." The clinical assessment of his cruelest decision, delivered in his own daughter's voice, left Jackson speechless. "She also told us we should be grateful," Summer added, her gaze disconcertingly perceptive. "Your rejection taught us early that external validation is irrelevant to intrinsic worth." "I didn't reject," Jackson began, but Maya interrupted. "Your exact words, according to Mom, were, 'You're just a temporary mistake, Tiffany. Never enough for someone like me,' and something about needing someone from your circle who understood your world." Maya recited his 15-year-old cruelty with perfect recall. "That constitutes rejection by any standard definition." Jackson stared, horrified to hear his worst moment quoted verbatim by a child he'd never known. Had Tiffany truly shared every detail with them? The thought that these brilliant young women had grown up knowing precisely how he'd dismissed their mother, and by extension them, made him physically ill. "Miss Williams!" A reporter from the Financial Times approached, notepad ready. "I'm hoping for a comment on the market implications of your keynote, and perhaps a response to rumors that Phoenix has acquired Reed Quantum." Tiffany smiled graciously. "I can confirm that Phoenix Innovations has indeed added Reed Quantum to our portfolio for $400 million, approximately one-third of its actual value, but appropriate given their current financial circumstances." The reporter's eyes widened at the confirmation. "And the timing of this announcement, coming as it does after revealing your biological connection to Mr. Reed's family line, was that strategic?" "The acquisition was purely business," Tiffany replied smoothly. "Reed Quantum has valuable intellectual property that aligns with our development roadmap. The personal connection is incidental and historical." Smartphones around them began lighting up with notifications as the news spread. Jackson watched, helpless, as his company's dismemberment became breaking news in real time. "And Mr. Reed," the reporter turned to him, "your response to both the acquisition and the revelation about your biological daughters?" Jackson opened his mouth but found no words. What could he possibly say that wouldn't compound the disaster? "Mr. Reed is processing significant information," Tiffany interjected professionally. "I'm sure Reed Technologies will issue an appropriate statement when they've had time to consider their position." With that diplomatic rescue, which somehow managed to make him appear even more pathetic, Tiffany checked her watch. "If you'll excuse us, our helicopter is waiting. We have investors in Tokyo expecting a video conference before dawn." "Of course," the reporter nodded, already typing furiously on his phone. "Thank you for the confirmation on the acquisition." As Tiffany guided her daughters toward the exit, Summer turned back briefly, meeting Jackson's gaze with an expression too complex for her 14 years. Statistically speaking, most people regret their actions of omission more than their actions of commission as they age. Something to consider. With that parting comment, neither accusation nor absolution, the Williams women departed, leaving Jackson alone with his champagne flute and the gathering storm of reporters who had just realized his presence. He retreated to the terrace, desperate for air and momentary escape. His phone vibrated continuously in his pocket, undoubtedly the board, his PR team, Catherine, all demanding explanations he couldn't provide. Through the glass doors, he could see the ballroom buzzing with activity. Guests huddled around phones and tablets, everyone discussing the bombshell that had just exploded in their midst. A waiter approached with a fresh glass of champagne. "Sir, you might want to see this." He discreetly offered his tablet, open to a breaking news alert. The headline glared up at Jackson, accompanied by the photo taken minutes earlier of him standing beside Tiffany. "Technology phenomenon reveals. Prodigy daughters are rejected. Heirs of Reed Empire, the twist that shook Wall Street." The article began with ruthless efficiency. 15 years ago, Jackson Reed, heir to Reed Enterprises, told Harvard scholarship student Tiffany Williams she wasn't enough for someone of his social standing when she revealed her pregnancy. Tonight, their paths crossed again, with Williams now a billionaire CEO and their previously unacknowledged triplet daughters recognized as the most extraordinary young minds in modern science. Jackson's hands trembled as he returned the tablet. The story had already formed its narrative. Privileged heir rejects brilliant woman and their exceptional children, only to be humiliated years later as she acquires his failing company. It was the perfect morality tale for the digital age, complete with villains, heroes, and poetic justice that would play endlessly across social and traditional media. As he watched Tiffany and the triplets board the sleek Phoenix helicopter on the hotel's rooftop landing pad, Jackson realized that tomorrow's board meeting would be the least of his concerns. His entire life, past, present, and future, had just been rewritten in a single evening by the woman he'd once believed would never be significant enough to matter. While Jackson stood frozen on the terrace with his phone continuing to vibrate with urgent messages, the reporter from the Financial Times approached another executive, his question carrying clearly through the open door. "Senorita Williams just confirmed Phoenix acquired Reed Quantum. This isn't just about a corporate acquisition, is it?" The question from the Financial Times reporter lingered in the air, spreading through the crowd like wildfire. Indeed, this wasn't just about a corporate acquisition. It was a modern tale of retribution that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Jackson Reed's Tribeca penthouse, illuminating the chaos of his personal reckoning. Television screens on every wall displayed his face alongside photos of Tiffany and the triplets, with headlines scrolling beneath that felt like body blows. CEO of Reed denied paternity of genius billionaire heiresses. Tiffany Williams, from rejected single mother to billionaire who bought ex's company. The heirs Jackson Reed never wanted to know. Jackson sat motionless on the edge of his Italian leather sofa, still wearing last night's rumpled tuxedo. His phone had finally stopped ringing around 4 in the morning, not because the calls had ceased, but because the battery had died. The landline, however, continued its relentless assault, each ring like a hammer against his skull. When he finally answered, his assistant's voice was tense with barely contained panic. "Mr. Reed, the board has convened an emergency meeting at 10. They're demanding explanations about everything. The press is swarming the building. What should I tell them?" "I'll be there," Jackson replied mechanically, his voice hollow. His temporary fiancée, Catherine Huntington, had already made her position clear via text at 3:45 in the morning. "Just saw the news. This engagement is over. My father sends his regards." The message concluded with a photo of her empty ring finger. Catherine had been a strategic choice, daughter of Senator Huntington, with connections that could stabilize Reed Technologies' government contracts. The relationship had been more merger than romance, but its dissolution still represented another domino falling in his carefully constructed life. In the marble shower, hot water pounded against Jackson's skin as he tried to wash away the previous night's revelations. But no amount of imported French soap could cleanse the stark truth. 15 years ago, he had made a decision that would ultimately dismantle everything he valued. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him. He'd rejected Tiffany Williams because she wasn't enough for his world, and now she owned pieces of that world while he struggled to maintain his grip on what remained. Across town, the Phoenix Innovations headquarters buzzed with controlled energy. If employees were discussing the previous night's revelations, they paused respectfully when Tiffany emerged from the elevator at precisely 8:30, followed by the triplets who had insisted on coming to the office rather than attending their scheduled university lectures remotely. Tiffany conducted her morning executive meeting with characteristic composure, reviewing quarterly projections and finalizing the integration plan for Reed Quantum. The acquisition team presented timelines for incorporating the division's assets and talent, while marketing outlined messaging that emphasized technology synergies rather than personal connections. We'll issue a single statement acknowledging the personal history, then pivot immediately to the business rationale, explained the communications director. Our message is clear. This acquisition was strategic, not emotional. Tiffany nodded approval. Phoenix has always prioritized innovation over sentiment. That doesn't change today. Only when the team dispersed did Eleanor Chen, now senior vice president and Tiffany's longtime mentor, close the door and ask the question everyone else had carefully avoided. "How are you really feeling?" Tiffany's professional mask softened slightly as she looked out the window at the Manhattan skyline. Strangely, lighter. 15 years keeping that connection as a secret, and now it's all exposed. I didn't plan the confrontation, but when I saw him there... "You handled it magnificently," Eleanor assured her. "The girls, too. They're processing," Tiffany admitted. They've known about him their whole lives in abstract terms, but seeing him in person was different. Eleanor studied her protégé with concern. "And the acquisition timing? The board is wondering if we should have delayed given the circumstances." "The timing was coincidental but optimal," Tiffany replied, her business acumen reasserting itself. Reed Quantum was undervalued, desperate for capital, and strategically aligned with our quantum computing division. The personal connection is irrelevant to the business case. At 10 o'clock sharp, Jackson entered the Reed Technologies boardroom to face 18 grim-faced board members. The tension was palpable, executives shifting uncomfortably as he took his seat at the head of the table. Harrison Wells, the board chairman and longtime friend of Jackson's grandfather, opened the meeting without preamble. "You have 3 biological daughters with the CEO of Phoenix Innovations, the company that just acquired our quantum division, and you never thought to mention this conflict of interest?" "I didn't know," Jackson defended weakly, his voice barely audible. "I never knew about the children." "Worse yet," exclaimed Victoria Mercer, the newest board member. "It demonstrates a catastrophic lack of diligence in personal matters that affected the corporation. The press is having a field day with your image as absent father, while your biological daughters revolutionize the industry. It's a public relations nightmare of unprecedented proportions." For the next 2 hours, Jackson endured a barrage of accusations and demands for explanation. Each board member seemed personally betrayed, their concerns ranging from stock devaluation to potential shareholder lawsuits alleging failure to disclose material personal relationships. "The stock has dropped 17% since market opening," reported the CFO grimly. "We're projecting further decline as this story continues to dominate business news." By meeting's end, the verdict was unanimous. Jackson would be temporarily removed as CEO pending an ethics investigation. The board would install an interim leader while determining whether his position was salvageable at all. "We'll announce your leave of absence this afternoon," Wells concluded. "Clean out your office by 3. Security will escort you out." The humiliation of being escorted from the building his grandfather had constructed 60 years earlier was perhaps the lowest point in Jackson's professional life. Employees averted their eyes as he carried a single box of personal items across the lobby, past the receptionist who had greeted him cheerfully every morning for a decade, but now studied her computer screen with sudden intensity. Outside, reporters shouted questions that blended into white noise as he ducked into the waiting town car. Their cameras captured his exit, another indignity that would cycle through news outlets by evening. While Jackson's world collapsed, the Williams women faced their own media storm with characteristic poise. Reporters camped outside Phoenix headquarters, desperate for comments from the triplets about their newly revealed paternity. "How do you feel knowing your biological father is watching your success after rejecting you?" shouted one particularly aggressive reporter as security escorted the girls to the waiting car. Jade, always the most direct, paused briefly. "We don't think of him as a father. A father is someone who raises, protects, and loves you. We have a mother who did all that alone, and we're proud of her." The response, captured and shared millions of times across social media platforms, only cemented the public narrative of Jackson as the villain in a modern morality tale. 3 days after the Economic Forum, Jackson appeared in the lobby of Phoenix Innovations, sober, humbled, and desperate. After 40 minutes of waiting, a deliberate power move he recognized from his own playbook, he was escorted to Tiffany's office on the top floor. She received him with distant professionalism, seated behind a desk of sustainable harvested wood that probably cost more than his first car. The office, like Tiffany herself, projected understated power, no flashy displays of wealth, just quiet confidence in its own significance. "Jackson, what can I do for you?" Her tone was the same one she might use with any mid-level executive seeking a meeting. "I want to meet them," he said without preamble. "They're my daughters. I have rights." Tiffany leaned forward, her eyes hardening. "Rights? Interesting that you mention those now. Where were these rights when I begged you to talk about their future? When you had me escorted from your building like disposable waste?" "I made a terrible mistake," he admitted, voice breaking. "The worst mistake of my life, but I can still be part of their lives. I can offer so much." "What, exactly?" Tiffany interrupted, genuinely curious. "Money? They have trust funds larger than your current net worth. Connections? Their network includes 3 Nobel laureates who mentor them. Family name? Williams has served them perfectly well so far." "I'm their father," he insisted desperately. "Biologically, yes. Legally, no. You never acknowledged paternity, Jackson. Never paid a cent in child support. Never asked if we were alive or dead in 15 years. Tiffany maintained her calm voice, not out of consideration for him, but because anger would give him too much importance. "And more importantly, my daughters are legally emancipated minors as of age 14 due to their exceptional capabilities. They make their own legal decisions now." "Can I at least speak with them, please?" Tiffany studied the broken man before her, the same one who had once made her feel so small. "It's not my decision to make. I'll forward your request to them. If they wish to meet you, I'll arrange it." 1 week later, Jackson received a formal email. The triplets agreed to meet him once, on neutral ground, at the MoMA restaurant, without press. The meeting was brief and devastating in its civility. The 3 teenagers listened to his awkward apologies and pathetic explanations with the same analytical expression, assessing him as they would evaluate a flawed algorithm. "I'd like to be part of your lives," he concluded after 15 minutes of monologue. "In some way, any way you'll allow." Summer spoke first, her tone clinical. "Why? What has changed between then and now?" "I've changed," he answered. "Seeing who you've become—" "Ah," interrupted Maya. "So it's because we're successful now. If we were ordinary teenagers, would we still be invisible to you?" "No, it's not that," he protested, but the damage was done. "Our mother never spoke ill of you," observed Jade. "She simply told us facts, that you didn't want children at that time, that you chose your career and family over us. Those were your choices, and we've lived with the consequences." "We can forgive you," offered Summer, surprising her sisters. "But that doesn't mean we need you in our lives. Do you understand the difference?" Jackson nodded, devastated by the implacable maturity of those who should have been his daughters. At the end of lunch, he handed each girl an envelope. "What is this?" asked Maya suspiciously. "Reed Technologies shares in your names. It's all I can offer." The 3 exchanged identical looks before Jade responded, "We appreciate the gesture, but we cannot accept. It would be a conflict of interest, since Phoenix now holds a significant stake in Reed. Leaving the envelopes untouched, the three rose in unison. "We wish you well, Mr. Reed," said Jade formally. "We won't hold grudges, but we also don't need to prolong this connection." 2 weeks later, Reed Technologies announced a complete restructuring. Jackson Reed stepped down as CEO to focus on personal matters. Catherine Huntington publicly canceled their engagement. His family, embarrassed by the scandal, discreetly distanced themselves. In his emptied apartment, Jackson watched Tiffany's CNBC interview through the window overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Serene and powerful, she discussed the future of quantum technology. "You've built an impressive empire as a single mother," noted the interviewer. "Any resentment about the past?" Tiffany smiled genuinely. "None. Every obstacle I faced made me stronger, more determined. My daughters grew up seeing that their worth doesn't depend on anyone's validation. That's worth more than any fortune." And what about Jackson Reed? There are rumors he tried to reconnect with his daughters. "That's a private matter for my daughters to decide." Tiffany paused. "But I can say that I built a life that doesn't depend on his presence or absence. Our success isn't revenge. It's simply the result of our own worth, which always existed, even when it wasn't recognized." Jackson turned off the television, finally understanding the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just 3 extraordinary daughters and the remarkable woman Tiffany had become, but the chance to have been part of something genuinely meaningful, a family that, despite his rejection, had prospered and transformed the world. The rain tapped gently against the windows of the MoMA restaurant as Jackson stared at the untouched envelopes on the table. Each envelope contained share certificates worth millions, his desperate attempt to buy connection with daughters who wanted nothing from him. The triplets' departure had been polite, measured, final. They moved through the restaurant with practiced grace, acknowledging other diners who recognized them with small nods, never looking back at the man they'd just dismissed from their lives. For several minutes after they left, Jackson remained frozen, surrounded by the remnants of an uneaten lunch and rejected offerings. A waiter approached cautiously. "Sir? Will there be anything else?" Jackson looked up, momentarily confused as if waking from a trance. "No, just the check." Walking through Central Park afterward, Jackson found himself analyzing the encounter with the clinical detachment he typically reserved for failing business ventures. The girls had been unfailingly polite, more courteous than he deserved. They'd listened to his stumbling apologies without interruption. They'd even offered forgiveness, that strange gift he hadn't earned and couldn't use. What they hadn't offered was opportunity. No openings, no invitations to try again, no expressions of curiosity about the man whose DNA they carried. Their forgiveness came with clear boundaries, absolution without attachment. "We wish you well, Mr. Reed." The formality of Jade's parting words echoed in his mind. Not Dad, or even Jackson. Just Mr. Reed, a stranger who happened to share their genetic code. Back in his penthouse that evening, Jackson poured himself a scotch and finally faced the barrage of messages he'd been avoiding. His PR team had prepared 3 different statements about his leave of absence from Reed Technologies. His lawyers warned of potential shareholder lawsuits. Catherine's assistant requested a time to collect her remaining belongings from his apartment. Most painful were the messages from his mother. Terse, disappointed texts asking how he could have hidden 3 granddaughters from her for 15 years. The following morning, Reed Technologies announced Jackson's permanent resignation. The press release cited his desire to focus on personal matters, a euphemism transparent to everyone in business circles. By afternoon, the board had named Harrison Wells as interim CEO while they conducted an executive search. Days blurred into weeks. Jackson declined interviews, avoided social engagements, and watched from a distance as his former life disintegrated. Catherine made their breakup public through a carefully worded statement to Page 6 that portrayed her as the wounded party. His membership at the Metropolitan Club was quietly placed under review. former associates suddenly found their calendars too full for golf or drinks. The Reed family, always obsessed with appearances, handled the scandal with practiced efficiency. His mother canceled her annual charity gala. His father, though long retired, issued a statement expressing disappointment in personal choices that do not reflect family values. Cousins and extended family maintained strategic silence, neither defending nor condemning him publicly. Meanwhile, Phoenix Innovations announced its historic merger with Nakamura Technologies, Japan's leading quantum computing firm. The business press heralded the partnership as transformative for the industry, with projected valuations exceeding $6 billion. Photos of Tiffany and the triplets signing the agreement in Tokyo dominated financial news, their matching crimson suits a striking visual statement of unified power. On a rainy Tuesday, exactly 1 month after the MoMA meeting, Jackson sat alone in his living room watching Tiffany's live interview on CNBC. She appeared perfectly composed in a tailored cream suit, her answers thoughtful and precise as she discussed Phoenix's expansion plans. The Nakamura merger represents a natural evolution of our quantum computing division, she explained. Their hardware capabilities complement our security protocols, creating an integrated ecosystem that's greater than the sum of its parts. The interviewer nodded appreciatively before shifting tone. On a personal note, you've built an extraordinary empire as a single mother. Many in your position might harbor resentment about past obstacles. Do you? Tiffany's expression remained serene. None whatsoever. Every challenge I encountered became a catalyst for growth and determination. My daughters grew up seeing that their worth doesn't depend on external validation. That lesson is more valuable than any fortune. Speaking of your daughters, the interviewer continued, there have been rumors that Jackson Reed attempted to reconnect with them after the Economic Forum revelations. Can you comment on that? That's a private matter for my daughters to decide, Tiffany replied diplomatically. They're extraordinary young women who make their own informed choices. What I can say is that I built a life that doesn't depend on his presence or absence. Our success isn't revenge. It's simply the result of our own worth, which always existed, even when it wasn't recognized. The camera cut to a recent photo of the triplets at a global technology conference, their poised smiles and confident postures belying their 14 years. Jackson stared at the screen, searching their faces for any trace of himself beyond the superficial genetic markers. What he found instead was Tiffany, her determination, her intelligence, her dignity reflected in 3 different expressions of the same resilient spirit. He turned off the television, finally understanding the magnitude of what he'd lost. Not just 3 extraordinary daughters and the remarkable woman Tiffany had become, but the chance to have been part of something genuinely meaningful, a family that, despite his rejection, had prospered and transformed the world. The following day, Jackson met with his financial advisors. For hours, they reviewed his personal holdings, separate from Reed Technologies. Despite the company's struggles, Jackson's personal wealth remained substantial. Old family money, strategic investments, properties in 4 countries. "What exactly are you looking to do?" asked Morris Goldman, his longtime financial manager, after Jackson rejected 3 different portfolio restructuring proposals. "Something meaningful," Jackson replied, surprising himself with the answer. "Something that matters." 2 days later, he contacted his lawyers with specific instructions. By week's end, paperwork was filed establishing the New Beginnings Foundation, endowed with his remaining shares in Reed Technologies and $20 million in personal assets. The foundation's mission, providing educational and professional support to single mothers facing financial hardship. The press release went out without fanfare, a small notice in the business section that most readers overlooked. It stated simply that Jackson Reed had donated his remaining stake in Reed Technologies to fund scholarships and entrepreneurial grants for single mothers. No mention of Tiffany or the triplets, no public atonement or plea for redemption, just a quiet acknowledgement of a debt that could never truly be repaid. 3 months later, in a small conference room at New York University, Jackson sat at the back as 20 women received the foundation's first grants. Each recipient had a story of perseverance, single mothers working multiple jobs while pursuing degrees or building businesses. As they accepted their awards, many spoke of children watching them struggle, of sacrifices made, of determination fueled by necessity. Jackson remained anonymous, introduced only as a foundation representative by the program director. He had no desire for recognition or gratitude. This wasn't about redemption in others' eyes. It was about finding purpose in the wreckage of his former life. After the ceremony, one recipient approached him, a young woman juggling nursing school with raising twin boys. "Thank you," she said simply. "This grant means my sons won't have to choose between heat and dinner this winter." Jackson nodded, unable to find adequate words. What could he possibly say to someone embodying the strength he had once dismissed so callously? That evening, alone in his apartment, now downsized to a more modest Upper West Side condo, Jackson opened his laptop and did something he'd been avoiding for months. He searched for information about the Triplets, not through news articles or business profiles, but through their academic work. Jade's mathematical theories on computational efficiency, Maya's papers on ethical AI development, Summer's quantum research published in prestigious scientific journals. He read until dawn, understanding perhaps 10% of the technical content but recognizing in every paper the extraordinary minds he had no part in shaping. 6 months after the economic forum that changed everything, Phoenix Innovations hosted the Global Technology Summit, the industry's premier gathering of innovators and thought leaders. Jackson watched the live stream from his apartment, an outsider peering into a world where he once commanded respect. The summit's closing ceremony featured Tiffany Williams delivering the keynote address, with the Triplets joining her on stage for the announcement of Phoenix's newest initiative, a global educational platform providing free advanced technical training to underprivileged students. Technology's transformative power should never be limited by economic circumstance, Tiffany declared to thunderous applause. Phoenix Academy will identify brilliant minds wherever they exist and give them the tools to reshape our collective future. The camera panned to the Triplets, now 15, standing tall and proud in matching crimson suits. They formed a perfect line with their mother, 4 extraordinary women who had transformed rejection into empire, dismissal into determination. As the audience rose in standing ovation, Jackson noticed something he'd missed before. Behind the confident smiles and poised exteriors, each of the Triplets possessed a distinct expression of Tiffany's resilience, Jade's unwavering focus, Maya's innovative spirit, Summer's analytical depth. Their eyes might carry his genetic signature, but their souls reflected the woman who had raised them to believe in their intrinsic worth regardless of external validation. Jackson closed his laptop as the live stream ended. The regret that had consumed him for months had gradually transformed into something else. Not acceptance exactly, but recognition. The Williams women didn't need his redemption story. They had written their own narrative of success without him, and perhaps his only contribution now was to respect the boundaries they had established. The next morning's Financial Times included a small notice that Jackson Reed had been appointed executive director of the New Beginnings Foundation, now expanding its mission to include technology education for children of single-parent households. The article made no connection to Phoenix Academy or the Williams family. Those dots were left for informed readers to connect themselves. In her office overlooking Manhattan, Tiffany read the notice, a thoughtful expression crossing her face before she turned to more pressing matters. The past had its place, but her focus remained where it had always been, on building a future defined by possibility rather than limitation, by capability rather than circumstance. On the stage of the Global Technology Conference, Tiffany Williams and her daughters, Jade, Maya, and Summer, formed a perfect line in their coordinated crimson attire, 4 extraordinary women who had transformed cruel rejection into a billion-dollar empire, proving that the greatest legacy comes not from the name one inherits, but from the value one creates for the world, a truth that Jackson Reed understood too late, but that might serve as a lesson for others who confuse privilege with worth. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.